Hello and welcome to a new episode of Mole Thoughts. My name is ChaosMole and today we have a look at Total War Pharao. Before we jump into this, thank you very much SEGA Europe for providing the key for free. I do appreciate that. And we have to talk about, is this game worth its full price title or is it just a glorified expansion? Now, before we jump into the gameplay, to answer that question, we have to take a look at the performance of the game, because if you have played any of the Total War games, you know that performance can be hit or miss. And, well, good news, at least on my system in 4040p and ultra settings, the game is running constantly at 60 FPS. Now, I do run a Geforce RTX 3080 with 12GB of RAM, as you can see here, but I do run a much older CPU with the Ryzen 7 2700. If you want to see my full system, you can find it down below in the video description. But with that said, I'm running smoothly 60 on the campaign map, and I'm running smoothly 60 in the fights. Now, did I found bugs and glitches? No. I had some crashes if I minimize the game too often. Apparently it doesn't like that, but that is something you can rectify, right? So not too much of a big deal. But with that said, let's jump into the gameplay and let's talk about the economy and the strategy map first, and then we are talking about the combat. So you can choose from 8 distinct leaders, or that's at least what they are telling you, because they don't really feel that distinct. Here's Irsu, which is focusing on raising cities and pillaging and heavy units as front fighters. And then I also played another character which is completely focusing on gold and range combat. And even with that said, they don't feel that different. They don't feel that distinct. At least not in the first half of the game. Later on, yes, they become a little bit more distinct in what they are doing, right? Hit and run tactics or just marching at the enemy. But I still would have loved to have some real difference. The same goes for the tech tree. The tech tree is there, and yes, it is different depending on which leader you're playing, but not that much. Like, a lot of the systems are pretty much the same depending on who you are playing. Now, let's talk about the resources. If you have played Total War Troy, you recognize this, because they use the same resource system there, and this is why a lot of people say this is just a copy of Troy. No, it's not. They really just decided to take the resource system. That would be the same thing as if you would say, you know what, all the Total War games are just like expansions because they are using the same resource system, which is gold. Right? Total War has been using gold for decades as the resource, and now they are trying to diversify more, which is good for the balance, because in a lot of Total War games there were 2 options. Gold was scarce and you were really running out of it all the time, or it was a non-issue and you had so much gold that it never became a problem. So finally, having to look out for the different resources you have on the world map is a good thing, or you think at least that would be the case, because unfortunately there is one resource to rule them all. No, it's not bronze, it's not gold, it's stone. Wait, stone? Yeah, stone is the most important resource in this game. Why is that the case? Well, first of all, stone is not that often on the map. I was actually taking over 30 turns to finally get stone in my starting area, which is here, and you have to look for stone a little bit on the map. But far more important, stone is a finite resource. You can run out of stone. Can you run out of stone completely? No, you will still produce some stone when this is gone, but it's like 10% or so. It's laughable. It's laughable. So every decision you make from now on is how to get stone. But wait, why do you need stone that desperately? Well, of course, you need stone to build your buildings, right? Like, every building you want to build costs you some sort of stone, right? Some amount of stone. You also need stone for the outposts. Yes, the outposts from Empire are back, where you can build some of the buildings outside of your city. Problem is, they are super vulnerable and they can be easily destroyed, and you will lose your stone resource. So that is already a huge problem, but it gets even bigger when you are looking at the core mechanic of the game, which is the pillars of civilization. So you are in the end times. This is the end of the Bronze Age, and there will be events and characters on the map which will try to destroy said pillars. What are the pillars? Well, you can see them on the map. They are the cities with the golden ring around them, and when they are getting destroyed, well, you are going to the collapse of civilization, and that is something which is to be avoided. So you have to go around and rebuild those cities. How do you rebuild them? Well, of course, with stone. But we have already established that stone is a finite resource. So a lot of the decisions and a lot of attacks and wars you are starting is because you want the stone resource to later on rebuild the world. And so with that, stone is becoming the most important resource, and unfortunately I had a lot of rounds where I didn't build anything in my cities, even though I had the resources, just because I was thinking, man, but what if I need the stone later on for something far more important? Nah, let's not build that, right? You become super conservative with your stone, and it doesn't feel that great. Speaking of conservative and bringing back the old school playstyle, let's talk about the AI in the game. The AI in the game is still cheating their ass off, yes, that is still happening, and it also makes some really stupid decisions. Like, I fought a war in this area and I lost a few units in a battle, and then this faction up here declared war on me because I was going down in the military ranking a little bit, and they immediately thought, you know what, it's time for war. It makes absolutely no sense when you look how far away they are. And again, I recovered after 2 turns and got my military back, right? So I was stronger than them. We are still at war. I haven't seen them in decades, right? I don't even know who those people are. But unfortunately, the AI is still doing that. And also you have those events going on which also take up your attention, and it's like there's a lot of stuff going on the world map, but it always feels like it's not too important, right? It's kind of weird. Quick note on the court system, which unfortunately this character doesn't have because I'm not in any of the court. The court system is now your spy system. They brought that back. You know, Creative Assembly sometimes kind of decide if they want to have the spy system in an interface or if they actually want to have spies running around on the world map. But they are back, and you can start intrigues, you can start assassinations, and yes, you can start your usurp of a throne if you so desire, and also start some little civil wars. Yay! Speaking of wars, let's talk about the battles. So the battles in the game are still functioning like every Total War game. There hasn't really changed too much. 2 things I definitely want to point out. They are now utilizing your surroundings more to give you debuffs. Like sand is very bad for your light units, or swarms are pretty bad for your medium units, and so on and so forth. But there are also now some crazy weather effects, and the weather can change while you are in combat, which is pretty cool. And they can have some hefty debuffs, or even like some buffs for you, right? If you are fighting against somebody who is using a lot of archers, a sandstorm might be actually super beneficial for you. But the biggest problem the combat has is, because it's the Bronze Age, it's mostly focusing on foot soldiers with axes, hammers, swords, khopesh, something like that, right? They're all very similar, but mostly foot soldiers. The thing is, you have a lot of cluster fluffs, right? You will see it here in a second when my armies are just clashing with the other army, that it is just a mess, and became even more a mess since now the banners are slowly getting destroyed of your units the longer the fight is going on, and that mixes up with the other banners of the enemy, and you cannot really see who is whom, and it becomes a cluster fluff, right? It's really hard to understand what the hell is going on, but that is very important, because I would say there's far more micromanagement in this game. I have never played a Total War game where I had to move around my units as much as in this game because, well, cavalry doesn't really exist too much. Yes, they are chariots, I know that, but a lot of the chariots are specific for some of the generals, or they are range chariots, so you still have to use your normal foot soldiers to attack from the rear. And it's really powerful, like it's super duper powerful, but there's just so much micro you have to do while you're on the battlefield, and it doesn't always feel great. Speaking of the fighting, let's also talk about a new mechanic, and that is the armor system. So we have light, medium, heavy armor. Depending on the armor type, your units are super fast when they have light armor, or they are super slow when they have medium armor. You can see it here, how the units have been moving the whole time, depending on the armor type, right? And not only that, the armor is also a very integral part while you are fighting because it's degenerating. And the moment your units run out of armor, well, they will just bleed out on the battlefield. So you have to manage this whole armor system even more. And as I said, there's a lot of micromanagement going on. So much micromanagement even that I felt like, man, I don't really have time to just look at the battles sometimes, which I really enjoy doing in the Total War games. I know that's a personal opinion here, and especially the hardcore players will scoff at that, but I enjoy that from time to time. You're just taking in the battlefield. And with all the micromanagement you kind of have to do now, you don't really have the time for that too much. But those are the biggest changes when it comes to the battlefield, right? It's smaller things. They're nice. I think the armor system is pretty cool, but they're not really changing the experience you were used to when you have played Total War games before. And that brings us to the big question. Now, with everything said, is this game worth $60? No. I would recommend to wait for a sale. And don't get me wrong, I love Egypt. I love the Bronze Age. Like, this is amazing for me. I love this. And I enjoy the game. But there is something in the back of my head which just doesn't want to disappear. And it feels like as if Creative Assembly just used this game to test something. They want to test new gameplay mechanics. They want to test like cool little gadgets, like now having multiple resources, right? If you haven't played Troy, or having like an end time event and all that, like they took from Warhammer. So they take a lot of the systems they have kind of tried before in their other Total War games, and now try to see what sticks if that would be a standalone game, so that they can take those systems and put them into the next Total War games. Like, again, this feels like a project where they just wanted to test out a lot of things and wanted to see what sticks with the player. But asking $60 for that, that's a steep price to ask. And again, it's a quality game. Especially if you haven't played Troy, if you haven't played a Total War game in a while, I can see that this game is for you if you like the Bronze Age, if you like the Egypt setting, and then you can check it out. But if that isn't for you, then no, you shouldn't touch this game. That's as simple as that. Is it just a copy of Troy? I don't feel like it. Like, I feel like it's its own game, but it still hasn't enough going for itself. That's the problem. With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you still have some questions or want to tell me something, let me know down below in the comments. But please be civil about it. And also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. And also, if you want to see more strategy games, which we are focusing here solely on the channel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. With that said, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.